Kirsty, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. It really, really is.
Yeah, thank you for coming and
Thank you.
getting to spend time. It's wonderful. It really is. Yeah.
We've been trying to do this for such a long time as well.
Yeah, it's been a few years.
Yeah.
Few years in the
really,
making.
really lovely. I think a good place to kick off is that often people can be cynical about the natural cycles, about the moon, about that we exist in this revolving rock in space, and just how to address it straight off the bat, how the moon, its cycles, the natural rhythms of nature, how they can affect with everyone's life, their day-to-day life.
Absolutely. I love skeptics. I really do. Because when we look at, if we take the moon, for example, the moon turns the tides on the earth. And if we didn't have the gravitational pull, so it's the gravitational pull of the moon that keeps the earth on its axis. So without the moon, we wouldn't even have seasons. And it's the moon that keeps us in a 24-hour day. If we didn't have the gravitational pull of a moon, it's said that a day on Earth would be between 6 to 8 hours long because we just hurtle around way more quickly. So the moon has this steadying gravitational effect on the Earth. And if you look at the fact the moon even turns the tides, and depending on which body part you want to talk about, we're kind of between 60 and 80% water. So to me, it's only natural then that the moon would affect that kind of watery inner world. And when we look at the moon in astrology, the moon is our inner world, our emotions, our subconscious, what we hide beneath the surface. And even with nature, I think there's a certain arrogance in a way as humans that we're like, oh, the planets don't affect me, the moon doesn't affect me, nature doesn't affect me. Whereas we're all living in this continual, beautiful cycle. And we've tried to make life very linear, where we go from A to B. And in actual fact, everything in nature has a rhythm and a cycle, including us. And I honestly believe that the same life force energy that causes everything in nature to grow is the same energy that causes our hair and our nails to grow. So we're part of nature. And when we can start to live back in that rhythm and alignment, life just takes on so much more meaning.
Yeah, totally. Like even I remember, like we went to school with a friend.
Maybe don't say
We went to school with a friend. I'm going to call him just Paddy. Very clever guy, amazing mathematician, and like the pillar of logic, rational reasoning, masculine thought process. And he became a guard, which in Ireland is a policeman, and extremely good, and moving right up the ranks. And he will always say when there is a full moon, they will put more guards on. Absolutely. Because there are more incidents. And he is rational, reason, logic. And I was amazed the time we were getting a tour of the station in Pierce, one of the Garda stations. And he told me this and was like, wow, you're talking to me about the moon? Yes. I never thought I'd hear the day.
And this is it. You'll find if you talk to teachers, they'll tell you children in school are affected. You talk to police, they'll tell you. People who work in A&E will tell you. But no one really wants to say it out loud in case they sound a little bit like, what, the moon affects you? So it's like everyone knows. And even if you take a full moon, for an example, once you know it's a full moon, you can't help but then start to notice the energy of everyone around you. And that's what really got me into it. People's energy differs on a new and full moon. You can see it.
Wow, in what way?
Wow. So even just to come back to this, so the moon cycle is 28 days.
28, 29-ish days. And I started living by the moon. I lived in India for a year. And it's traditional in the Ashtanga tradition that you don't practice on new and full moon days. And that was to do with the energetic cycle, because on a new moon, your energy is lower. People more likely to be slow in practice and will get injured. On a full moon, we've got the peak of the energy, so people tend to rush through practice. And again, there'd be more injuries. So while we were in India on moon days, you'd get a day off. So everyone would sit in cafes, coffee shops, have a really long breakfasts. And I started to notice that people's energy would just be different on moon days. So you'd suddenly find that everyone had similar issues that were coming up, or similar things they'd be talking about, or similar relationship issues, or in their heads worrying about certain things. And it got me really hooked. So I'd spend their moon days just really feeling into the energy of the moon and being like, what does this moon feel like it's bringing? And that's what got me started 15 years ago, of just seeing.
And does it typically affect men and women the same? Because the way people will often say, the moon is more maternal and it influences cycles and menstrual cycle, whereas men, no, it doesn't affect men as much. Yeah. But
everyone is affected. So if we do a tiny little whistle-stop tour through the lunar cycle, you will start to notice men are, but women more so, just because we have a natural 28, 29-ish day hormonal cycle that mirrors the moon. So I always start at the end. There's 8 phases of the moon. And each phase lasts about 3 or 4 days. So right before a new moon, you get what's called the dark moon. And this is the lowest energetic and emotional part of the lunar cycle. So I say to people, even if you're a bit of a skeptic, start to notice how perhaps on a little recurring theme, you all of a sudden your boss gets on your nerves, or you end up arguing with the other half a little bit more, or you really dislike your commute to work, or just those things that bother you. I will almost guarantee that will be around the dark moon phase. Because what the dark moon does is it takes us into ourselves to show us where we're not in alignment with ourselves, with our values, with our life journey, with where our souls really want us to go. And the thing with us humans is we're all very good at telling people what we don't want, but we're not very good at really knowing what we want. So if you say to someone, what do you really want? They're kind of like, Whereas if you say to someone, what don't you want? They can list off, well, I don't like this and I don't want this and I don't want this. So the dark moon has a purpose in showing you what you don't want in order to know what you do want.
We started one of Ireland's first juice bars back in about 2005 and literally have been juicing for over 30 years. It's one of the quickest way to rebuild your immune system and literally get the essence of any fruit and veg. It's something I do regularly to ensure that my kids are getting more fruit and veg and more high nutrient dense foods. Yeah, we've partnered with a company called Nama Juicers. They make incredible quality juicers. They've innovated the standard juicer. It's an upright masticating juicer with a hopper. That means that you can juice hands-free. So you simply load the fruit and veg up the top and you don't have to, you just step away and it juices itself. It makes super high quality juice where the pulp literally comes out dry and it's easy to clean. They come with a 15-year warranty. They're offering you 10% off with the code HAPPYPAIR10. That's simply go to namawell.com, use the code HAPPYPAIR10 for 10% off at the checkout. Wonderful juicer, couldn't recommend them more. We're all about nature, health, and living a natural way of life. Back about 8 years ago, a friend, Tony Riddle, suggested I have a pair of shoes, lads, that are going to transform your life. And it's like, go away, Tony. They were a pair of Vivo barefoot shoes. They really were. They're amazing. They're minimalist, they're eco-friendly, and they're designed to let your feet move as freely as they would barefoot. It's about getting closer to nature with every step you take. They really are amazing shoes. They come in ranges for men's, women, for all aspects. Kids, they're a B Corp company, which means they're certified as being people working in a sustainable manner. Amazing people. We've hung out with them loads, and they really are at the forefront of health. We believe in them so much that we become ambassadors. It's all we've worn for the last 8 years. For running, for streetwear, for, they're even tuxedos. When I wear a tuxedo, I got a nice kind of formal pair. So they do offer a full range. Use the code HAPPYPAIR20 to get 20% off your next pair. And even as soon as I've got a baby girl, Fia, she's 8 months old. And as soon as she starts walking, I will definitely make sure she starts with a pair of Vivo barefoot shoes because they have a wide toe box, a minimal sole, and they'll really help connect her with nature and her natural movement. Research has shown that if you do wear a pair of Vivo barefoot shoes within a number of months, your foot strength will increase by 60%. So check them out, 20% off with the code HAPPYPAIR20 at checkout, vivobarefoot.com.
So in the case of the dark moon, so it'd be like, say, for example, you're having a fight with your partner, you're more like kind of understanding, I don't want this, I need to
this
work
needs
on
to
being
change
more
in our
empathetic
relationship.
or whatever.
Yes, this needs to change. This is where we're not communicating properly. This is where things are going unsaid and we're like keeping things and we're not speaking about where our little issues are. And then over and over again, if you start to notice patterns, they'll normally be around that dark moon where you're just taken so into your depths that you can't ignore anymore that little voice that's saying, I'm not speaking my truth here, I'm not living in alignment here, whatever it may be.
Dark moon then is more time for reflection.
Dark moon is the going in.
And it's before, so it's before
Right
the new moon.
before
So
the new
it's
moon.
the end of
the very end of the waning
after the
cycle.
full moon, is it? It's
Yes, the very end.
So it's when it's tiny.
Tiny. So then we get the new moon, and the new moon is the moment that the sun and the moon meet in the sky. This is an exact moment that the two meet. So the new moon says, you know what you don't want. What do you want? So this might be the time that you go, I want better communication in my relationship. I want us to feel close again. I want a job where I don't have to commute for 2 hours to get there. I actually want to change my job because I don't really feel valued. And then we've got a 2-week cycle then where the moon waxes. And this waxing part of the lunar cycle there is where we follow the growing light of the moon to do everything we can to bring our intentions to life.
What does waxing mean? I'm always confused.
Getting
waxing,
Growing, getting bigger,
getting bigger.
waxing. Yeah, waxing.
Where does it come from? Like waxing, getting bigger.
And
Like I
then
always think
waning,
wax,
either.
like a
And the
candle, you're
waning.
burning it. It's
Waning is like, the way the
Waning.
tide is waning, it's
Wane.
going out. Like waxing is getting bigger. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we get the new moon, you set your intentions. Now, just a little point on intentions, because as humans, we're brilliant at self-sabotage. So what people normally do is set 74 intentions to change their entire life, and it's impossible. So then about a week in, you go, oh, that doesn't work. That moon stuff doesn't work because nothing changed. So set yourself maybe 3 realistic things you want to work on, and then maybe 1 or 2 that are like a little bit bigger that might take a couple of lunar cycles to work through. Couple of days after the new moon, you get the waxing crescent moon, where you'll see that first tiny little sliver of the moon in the sky. So you'll see the first little bit of the
Wow,
moon.
so new moon, you don't even see the moon.
New
like.
moon's no moon in the sky because completely blocked out by the sun.
It's
So there's
gone.
gone.
Wow.
Gone.
Because I always say, in my own ignorant mind, it was like when the moon is like the little tiny
That's the
crescent moon.
waxing
That's the
crescent.
smallest.
Yeah.
But that's actually growing or
that's
shrinking.
growing. Yeah.
That's growing.
Yeah. So that's
Okay.
when the moon starts to grow. And then you get a waning crescent where again you get back down to the tiny little moon. So the waxing crescent moon starts about 3 days after the new moon, and this is the doing part of the lunar cycle.
And sorry, back to the crescent. Do you know the way if it's waxing or waning, is the crescent from a different side?
Yes. So the only difference, I get asked this question a lot from people in the southern hemisphere. The sign the moon is new or full in, the stage the moon is new or full in will always be the same, but they will see the moon upside down to us. So we here in the northern hemisphere, the moon will wax from the right to the left. So you'll see the little waxing crescent in the right will grow and grow and grow. The waning crescent will be down in the left. In the southern hemisphere,
The other way around.
upside down, other way around. So that's the only difference in the moon. So if you go to the southern hemisphere, I always get really confused because I'm looking at the waxing moon and to me it looks like the waning moon. So that's the only difference.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because the moon's got no natural light of her own. And so that's
It just
again what
reflects the sun,
it's a
like.
reflection of the sun. So when the sun and the moon are together in the sky, there's no reflection of the sun on the surface of the moon.
yeah,
So
of
we
course.
can't see the moon. So when we get the waxing crescent says, step up to the start line. What are you going to do about your intentions? You've set these intentions. You know what you want. What do you now need to do to make this happen? Like, do you need to gather information? Do you need to put your CV together to start to send it out if you're looking for a new position? Do you need to get clear on conversations you need to have with people? Like, what do you need to do? And then a couple of days later, we get what's called the first quarter moon. This is where you'll look up and you'll see exactly half a moon in the sky. This is normally people's favourite moment of the lunar cycle because it's when everything starts to come together. So when we find synchronicities happen, or you think about someone and they'll call you, or all those little magical things start to happen. And I say to people, this is the time of the lunar cycle to just say yes. So if you get an invite to something, say yes. If it's the time that someone will say, oh, my friend's company's looking for a job, and it'll be exactly what you're looking for. So just say yes to anything at that waxing crescent.
Wow,
It's the time where you really want to be seen and
Waxing
shine.
crescent,
The first
getting-
quarter moon is where you see half the moon. So this is exactly halfway between new and full. So this is the time to be seen, shine, put yourself out there, do everything you can to bring your dreams to life.
Wow.
A few days later, we get what's called the waxing gibbous moon. This is where you're
Waxing
going
gibbous
to,
moon.
you're going to
Gibbous.
look up in the sky and you're going to be like, is the moon full? Like, isn't the moon full? I'm not really sure. And there'll be a little tiny corner of the moon missing. This is when most people say they don't sleep. So, we hear a lot of people around the full moon going, oh, I'm not sleeping. It's the full moon. Because the moon talks to us through our emotions. So notice what you're feeling. The moon will talk to us through our sleep and our energy. So if ever you find you're particularly exhausted, not sleeping around a lunar phase, pay attention to what's in here, to what you're maybe not listening to. No. The reason we don't sleep around this part of the lunar cycle is the moon is giving you this big final push of lunar energy to get things done. So the moon is like, listen, 2 weeks ago, you set these intentions. You don't have time to go to sleep. Like, write the letter, have the conversation, do the thing, put yourself out there. Like, big last push of lunar energy. And then we get the full moon. So the full moon now, the moon and the sun are on opposite sides of the earth. We want to do one of 2 things on a full moon. First of all, we want to really celebrate ourselves because as humans, we don't do it enough. If I say to most people, like, tell me one brilliant thing you did last week, most people will go, well, Whereas if you say, tell me a few mistakes you made last week, people can reel off, oh, I did this and then that went wrong. So first celebrate yourself. Look at the last 2 weeks. What did I make happen? I did that really brave thing when I said yes to that thing that scared me. And I sent my CV off for that job that I was a bit worried that I might not get. And I had that brave conversation, and celebrate what you did really well. Because this in turn helps you to really start to trust yourself, to trust in your abilities, to trust what you're capable of, to really know that you can do it. But then the full moon also illuminates our life. So we get to look at our life and go like, oh. So what the full moon then will show you is where you got in your own way. Wow. So where you didn't say yes to the invite because you were scared that no one might talk to you when you got there, or you didn't send the CV off because that little voice in the back of your head said, oh, really? Are you sure you're going to be able to do that? You might not be good enough for this. And so this is why working with the lunar cycle is so powerful. Because what we normally do is we set an intention in January. And by the way, January is the worst time to set New Year's resolutions.
Wow, why's that?
Because we're working against nature. Everything in nature is in hibernation. Everything in nature is beneath the ground. It's cold. Everything's beneath the surface. There's no life. There's no energy. So if you set an intention in January, there's nothing bringing it to life. It's going to be on pause
for a few months until spring comes.
So the best time, my personal New Year is the spring equinox. That's when I celebrate the New Year.
That's a
March
good one.
21st.
Yeah. I celebrate the spring equinox then because everything in
It
nature
makes
is
a lot
on
of
my
sense.
side.
Like even hearing you talk about the moon, it's a total different paradigm with which to, there's this illusion of total autonomy and that we're in control of our lives and we are, what do I want right now? But in reality, we're, totally interdependent. Like our life,
system,
we're all really without going overly cliche, we're all ultimately one, and we're affected by the movements of others, by the movement of every little aspect of this life. So to live in harmony with the moon seems to be, it's like, that makes sense, doesn't it?
But then the reality is nowadays most people don't know where the moon, because we swim in the sea every morning at the same time, you're reasonably aware of the moon relative to previously when we didn't swim in the sea, because you'd know, oh, there's a full moon because the tide would be much further out or the tide would be much further in. Like, you do notice those type of things. And then you will sometimes see it at the other opposite side or near that. So we'll be a little bit more aware of the moon, but I wouldn't it still isn't part of something which I know that's waxing or waning or new moon.
But I think so that's a really key thing that I would often say to people, to try not to initially work with every single phase, because it's impossible. So if I carry on our journey, then I can tell you simply what people should work with. So the full moon is that moment where we look at our lives and we go, okay, this is where I got in my own way. This is what I now need to let go of and work on in order to be able to get what I want. So I always say to people, whereas that dark moon is the lowest energetic and emotional part of the lunar cycle, the full moon's the peak energetic part of the lunar cycle. So what we find on full moons is that, and this is why I say once you know about it, it's like if I say to you, yellow car, you're going to go out there and see yellow cars. As soon as something's in our conscious awareness. So once you start to understand the lunar cycles, especially if you go into cities or around a lot, you're going to know when it's a full moon, because everybody's energy and emotion is just there. It's there. And we tend to find around a full moon a lot of anger and frustration. But if we get really honest with ourselves, because again, as humans, we like to try and blame other people. It's your fault, I'm not happy. It's my parents' fault, it's my partner's fault, I'm not happy. But while we're giving our power away and we're waiting for them to change or something outside of us to be different before we can be happy, we give all of our power away. Whereas when we can take the responsibility back for ourselves, of our lives and where we are, we then take back the power. So when we look at a full moon and we look at our anger and frustration about why things didn't happen, 9 times out of 10, it's on us. It's because we didn't say yes to that opportunity. It's because we let that same doubt or fear creep back in again and stop us. It's where we let that same sabotage get in our way. And so when you work with lunar cycles over and over, you start to notice that's that same little sneaky voice again, but in a slightly different form. That's stopping me from doing what I want to do again. That's that same little sabotage, playing out again and again. So it's a real immense tool of self-awareness where you get to know yourself. You can't kid yourself anymore. You get to know your own stuff and go, here we are again. We are again, doing the same things again. And as we were mentioning before, when we normally make a New Year's resolution, it gets to March, we've forgotten about it. And then we're all going, it's Christmas again. And we've done nothing with our intentions. Whereas when you live with the moon, you've got 1 or 2 opportunities every month to check in with, am I going in the direction I want to go in my life? And if not, why not? So you get this constant monthly check-in. So you're not straying as far out of alignment with yourself and your life anymore. So the full moon, don't do anything, because the likelihood of full moon is we're just going to want to and like send it all out
Broadcast and
there.
whatever, yeah.
Really notice what you're feeling. I'm feeling really angry. Okay, what am I feeling really angry about? What am I really frustrated about? What's really, really getting to me? What's bothering me? Because a few days later, we'll get the waning gibbous moon. So the moon's lost a little bit of her fullness. And this is where we get to step back and really look at things and go, okay, this is what I need to work on. This is what I need to let go of. A couple of days later, we get the last quarter moon. So this is where, again, we'll get half a moon in the sky. And this is where the moon says to us, what are you really ready to let go of so that you don't take it into this next cycle with you? Now, a question I get asked a lot is like, well, how do I let go of something? Because you can't just like pull something out of your head and go, right, I'm not going to worry about that one thing anymore. Because you might have spent 20 years on loop with that same thing. So what we want to do when we're letting go is we want to add more of the other. So if you're struggling a lot with self-doubt, for example, you want to add more self-belief. So that might be on a daily basis at the end of every day. It's something I love to tell people to do. Look yourself in the eyes, if you can, in the mirror, and tell yourself 3 things you did well that day. You did really well when you did that thing. And that was really, really good when you like spoke up in that
nice
meeting.
Positive affirmation.
Yes, just so that then you start to find that trust in yourself and that belief in yourself and that knowing that I can do this, I've got this. And just showing up for yourself, because we so often abandon ourselves. And especially even with emotions, I mentioned before, we live in this linear world where we expect everything to be the same. So people might feel a certain emotion one day and be like, well, why do I feel like that? I didn't feel like that yesterday, and I shouldn't feel like this. So we invalidate our own emotions. And our emotions are our navigational system that's constantly saying to us, no, wrong way for you, slightly nudge this way, this feels good, this is where you should be. So when we can just start to show up for ourselves and bring in more of what it is that we want to create, we start to really find that self-knowing, that self-trust, that self-belief. And then we get back down to the dark moon again, where we start to really feel into what we really don't want. So then the cycle begins again.
So it's the 8th phase of the moon. And like, to be overly simplistic for myself, like, what are the kind of 4 ones? Like, I could probably grasp 4.
So
8, I'll have to really think. How do you? So it's like dark moon, time to reflect, time to get ready, because the good stuff's coming. Full moon, it's full power, but also time to kind of look back on what has happened. And in between, you have a waxing and a waning. And a waxing, it's getting bigger. It's you're setting your intentions, and waning, you are
releasing, letting go.
Okay.
So that's exactly it. So I always say to people, when you first start with just the 2. Okay. So dark moon, new moon. Oh, what am I feeling about? What do I want? Let me set some intentions. Next 2 weeks, do everything you can to make that intention come true. Full moon, check in. What did I do well? What worked? What am I celebrating? Where did I get in my own way? What didn't work? Where did I avoid, sabotage, whatever it might be? Once you've got those 2 on point, then you might add in a little check-in at the first and last quarter. So halfway to new, am I really doing everything that I could be doing to make this happen? Last quarter, am I really working on letting things go, or am I still holding on to certain behaviours and patterns? Because even though we think it's crazy that we would do something that sabotages us, it's comfortable. That's why we carry on doing it until the pain of like staying somewhere outweighs the discomfort of leaving. We're always going to choose to stay.
And how much, even looking back historically, like nowadays we're in the age of science and reason, and you know, the patriarch and whatever, which is male dominated, which wouldn't necessarily be in connection with the moon. Like looking back at previous civilizations that were very in touch with the moon, like what kind of civilizations, or what did they live? Because I know there's the likes of Rudolf Steiner, for example, who was the founder of biodynamic farming. He was all about planting on full moons, and the lunar cycle was very important in terms of growth.
Absolutely. And our ancestors would live by the moon, because the sun would give a day, a pattern of a day. But if they wanted to look any kind of longer term, our ancestors would just fully and completely live in that rhythm and cycle and alignment with the moon. So more rest on dark moon days, which kind of stands to reason even for being able to move around and things like that. If you had to move tribes, you wouldn't want to be in the light of the full moon where everyone could see you. Because I remember being in the desert once on a full moon, and it's like daylight. When you move away from all natural light, that light of a full moon when you're in the desert with no light pollution is like nothing I've ever experienced.
So bright.
So people would be still, gather, rest, retreat at a new moon when you're going inwards, and that kind of moving around energy. So our ancestors fully lived in alignment with it. There wasn't really a question of whether the moon affected us. The moon was just there, being tracked in the sky.
Wow. And even just going back to the masculine and feminine, because I know more women in my life that are, you know, they do live in harmony with the seasons. They're more aware of it. And part of it's because the menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
But is there gender is there certain relevance to men versus women, or?
Yeah.
Or
So women have a more natural affinity to the lunar cycle, with the moon being the feminine life force energy, and women having a 29-ish day hormonal cycle. So if we go back, and there's been the thing with things like the moon and astrology and things like that is there hasn't been any real scientific study done either way.
Yeah.
So there hasn't been this study to prove or disprove. It isn't there. So a lot of studies have been done, or a few studies have been done, that show that because now of natural lighting, that at one point we'd have lived with the moon because we'd have known when it was a full moon, but now we've got electric lights, so it can be light all the time. As soon as we don't live in that rhythm anymore. Even resting in winter, like historically our ancestors would have taken a lot more rest in winter and gone inwards in winter and been out there in the world in summer with the long days. And to go back to our point before about even the new year, we push against nature so much around Christmas and things because it's a time when everything about our ancient system wants to retreat and rest, and we're pushing ourselves out there into the world with noise and lights and party. And I honestly believe that is why so many people get to January depleted, exhausted, burned out, no energy, nothing to give, because we've really pushed.
Yeah.
So women traditionally, historically, would have all bled together at a dark and new moon. So women would have gathered
That's
together.
kind of menstruate. They'd all have their menstrual.
Yeah, they'd have gathered together in what was called a red tent and gathered together. And this would have been a real coming together of the power of women coming together, where women would have held and supported each other and kind of said, how are you? What are you going through? What can I do for you? And a time where women really gathered to
And women of different ages, because I remember when my wife was about to give birth to Theo, I remember Mom and Shiv and Helen and Janet and all like women in our, like close women in our tribe or in our family came to gather around Justine. It felt real like, wow. This is powerful. I felt like I better get out of here. These are mighty women.
This is women's work.
But this is mighty. It felt like, wow, this feels like I'm part of a tribe or something. It was beautiful.
Totally. And that's the power. There's a saying that when women come together with a shared intention, magic happens. Because again, women are the creative energy of the universe, whether that's to create life, to create dreams, to create, women are that creative energy. And the moon is the creative energy. And so when women gathering together to bleed together, there would have been immense power in that. And ancient tribes used to believe that's when a woman was most in tune with her intuition, her inner knowing, insights, downloads. And those women would have channeled through wisdom for the tribe. And so then women would have bled together on a new moon, ovulated with the fullness of the full moon.
Wow.
And been in that rhythm and that cycle. And then there is the opposite way to bleed, where women will bleed with the full moon, and this was what was known as the red moon cycle. It's the bleeding of priestesses or wise women, and so these wise women would have bled with the full moon. They would have then ovulated with the new moon, so they would have been in that space, holding the space for all the other women, taking care of them, being the powerhouses in the fullness of their ovulatory energy,
almost like nature.
And even nowadays in the kind of urban technological modern
detached,
environment, which we're kind of very removed from nature, do a lot of women's cycles typically follow those patterns where they're
yes and no, because as I just mentioned, if you've got things like electrical lighting, we're not in attunement anymore with where the moon is. But what you will notice, and all women will tell you this, you get a group of women living together or going on holiday together, they're going to sync up.
They'll sync in with the alpha female.
They will
Who's
sync
the
up.
alpha?
Yeah, they will sync up. And a lot of women say to me, how can I sync with the moon? Just start to notice what phase the moon is in. If you can go outside and look at the moon, brilliant. But just start to notice for yourself what phase the moon is in, and you will find your cycle will naturally, once you reclaim that natural rhythm and cycle, your wisdom, the intelligence of your body will naturally start to follow that again.
Wow. Really interesting. Yeah, because it's it's something that, as we said, with our life of AI and social media and technology and computer jobs and urban living, the moon just seems to be something which every now and again you
An
see.
old-fashioned thing.
Yeah, it doesn't
Like
seem
we
like
have to
something
grow our own food.
that has
Can
a
we not
relevance.
3D print our own food?
Exactly.
You know the way.
But it doesn't seem like have a relevance until I go to the sea someday and I'm going, geez, the tide's miles out. And I go, oh yeah, it must be a full moon. Like, and you go, oh my God, it's pulling like so much water this way and that way. So it's obviously going to have some gravitational. And then interesting, I did a course last week on kind of growing and farming, and it was talking
Principles of
it was the principle of biological systems, and it was talking about how a lot of plants, like even when it's not wet outside, they'll get watered from twice a day from the gravitational pull of the moon, because when the water table actually rises in the morning and then it'll drop in the evening, like it rises and it ebbs like the water table because of the gravitation. So it'll come up, it'll rise and it'll come up with water plants from the bottom, from the water table will rise up underneath the substrate or the subsoil, and then it will water the plants and then it'll fall back down. So it was talking about how, you know, the moon actually is involved with watering plants, which you don't really think about that.
No, it's incredible. But that
Yeah.
we're so disconnected from nature nowadays in our modern day world, because again, our ancestors used to worship the divine in nature. So they would go and speak to the gods and the goddesses. They would worship the seas and the mountains and the trees and the lakes and the streams, and that would be their connection to the divine, to source energy. And when that got disconnected from us, we really then lost our connection to life force energy, which we can all call upon at any time to really help us move through life in a different way.
Yeah, what was, sorry, can I interrupt? But on the course which I did last week, he was it was a very kind of scientific based course, and he was just talking about, he gave one example of this lady she was an amazing grower, like she was just on it, she was doing all the things, and she had the most perfect like farm. It was a 4-acre farm, and she, like, it was boom, boom, boom. And then he got to her onions, and her name was Liz, and she said he had never seen onions like them. They were like, every one of them was like a honker, like a half a kilo onion, like massive onions. And he said, like, I've never seen an onion patch like this. And he said to her, like, what did you do with the onions? Like, because everything else here is perfect, but your onions are like unbelievably perfect. And she had to think for a little bit, and she said, well, I think when we were planting the onions, we actually did an intention. We actually kind of, you know, said thanks for the seed and thanks for these onions. And like, and it wasn't, he said, it wasn't a wow, like a woo kind of all hold hands and do a chant, but like, because she's quite a rational woman, but they literally, that was the only difference that she could think of. And he was saying, the course which I was doing, he was talking about like plants can communicate. Absolutely. Like plants communicate with one another, and plants can communicate with humans if they're subtle enough. And he was talking about, like, in his 30 years experience of growing, that there, like, he said, like, I will have a growing plan, but ultimately I'll get out there in the patch and I'll go, at the start of the season, I'll go, right, and I'll look around and go, I'm going to plant carrots. Which bed wants the carrots this year?
Yeah.
And he'll have a look around, and he says, like, it sounds crazy and it sounds mad, but like, you know, there's a...
Based on that, I was out in the garden at the weekend sitting out. I said, I'm going to go out there and try to sit and commune with the land and see what it wants. We've built a new house, and the garden still needs bit of work. And I was sitting out there just kind of trying to feel into it. It hasn't told me yet, but I'm waiting. I'm at garden. If you're listening to me, please feed into me.
Yeah.
But then it's very esoteric, but I do believe, like, it's a bit like, you know, they can, whether you play a classical music or heavy metal music, like, you know, they have a different effect.
Absolutely.
But it's even down to, like, we're all, like, you walk into a room where there's a whole load of hatred, you want to recoil and pull straight back. You walk into a room where there's people having a laugh, everyone kind of goes, geez, I want to go in there. What's happening there? That sounds amazing. You know, like, it's just, we are all, what's the word? Like, symbiotic. You're all sharing.
Yeah. Or it's a bit like, you know, when someone's looking at you.
Totally.
You know when someone's looking at you, you know, it's a weird kind of thing, and it's the same way that...
But this is where I believe and hope there is a shift coming back into living more in alignment with the feminine, with the creative life force energy of the universe, because we've very much lived for the past few hundred years, very much in... And again, when we say masculine, this isn't men against women. We've all got masculine and feminine energy in us, but we very much lived in the masculine, which is here, it's in the head. If it can't be explained, if it can't be put in a spreadsheet,
measured,
if it can't be measured, it's not real.
Quantified.
Yes. So we live in here. We forget that we've got a body from kind of the neck down, and we live in here. And one of the main, our mind is, its intention is to keep you alive, right? But it's not really evolved for that many years. So our mind will run on a loop. And I get asked so much, how do I listen to my intuition. Like, what's the difference
Yeah.
between like my thinking mind and my intuition? The majority of our deep wisdom lives in our body. So as you mentioned before, you go into a room, you don't think, oh, this room feels like there's just been an argument in here. You feel it, right? You feel something in your body shift. You feel an energy in your body. And whereas our thinking mind, your thinking mind is noisy and loud and talks and talks and talks, and it will argue both sides of the argument. Yeah, you should definitely do that. Oh, no, you sure you should do it? Yeah, you should definitely should. No, you shouldn't. And I call it coming in the back door. It'll argue one side, then it'll come in the back door again and argue the other side. Our mind makes us feel more confused. There's more noise, there's more, and it just goes around and round. Whereas your intuition is a felt sense. And your intuition is normally very quiet, very soft, and it normally just says one word. Yes, no, stay, go. But the problem is because we've been taught that you can't explain that feeling. Well, what do you mean you just know? Well, what do you mean? Well, what do you mean? We discount it. And the reason I believe that very often we discount our intuition is because your intuition
is so clear and simple.
Well, it's so clear and simple, but also our intuition tells us in many cases what we don't want to hear. So our intuition tells us to leave when we've been trying to find all the reasons to stay because we're scared to leave.
Yeah.
So our intuition is that voice of inconvenient truth where we go, oh, damn it. So we try to ignore it because our intuition is that voice that says, and it's not, sometimes we want our intuition just to say all the nice things we want it to say, but our intuition is our... It's our truth
It's a good
teller.
one. Inconvenient truth is a good one.
Yeah, it's our real truth teller. So our intuition is that felt sense. And the more we can start to tap back into that, the more we'll begin to live again back in a rhythm and alignment. And we won't spend as much time in our heads going round and round and round.
Like for anyone listening who's kind of going, that sounds amazing, Kirsty. Yeah, I'm in it. I want to tune it. How does one start to even hear the small whispers of intuition or their internal teacher? Like, how do you connect with it when you're going around in your head all day long and you're looking at your phone and we're in this digital age? How do you?
So the best way I tell people to begin to do it is to put your phone away, to take a few quiet moments, to sit down, to close your eyes. First of all, to breathe into your body. Because again, we're so disconnected. Most people can't even breathe deep down into their belly. So first of all, just breathe, get into your body. And then if you've got a decision to make, think about or feel into leaving. How does that feel? And you don't go into the mind, not what your mind thinks about. How does that feel in your body? And then think about staying. How does that feel in your body? And what you'll start to notice is with one of them, there'll be a little contraction or your heart will race a little bit or something will happen in your body that starts to give you the signal. So it's just starting to feel into those very subtle little signals your body wants to give you. Now, another thing that people often confuse is fear as being a reason why we shouldn't do it. And fear and excitement feel the same in the body. They always feel the same. So when we're doing something big, a lot of people will say, but I feel you're always going to feel a small amount of fear around making a big change in your life because as humans, we're hardwired to resist change.
Yeah.
We're hardwired to resist it. But what we want to do is feel into that excitement of making the change and that trusting in yourself to know that no matter what happens, you're going to be able to do it. But just start to tune into those little subtle things in your own body. And the best way I can describe it is expansion, contraction. Certain things will make your body contract a little bit. And then certain things will feel expansive, even if it feels a little bit
an
like
expansive green light, go.
Yeah.
Contraction, constriction.
So just feel into, imagine doing one thing, imagine doing the other thing, and you'll just start to feel it. You'll just start to feel
it's a good way.
that little subtle difference in your body.
And over time, you stretch the muscle more, you can tune into it quicker. And
I suppose it's linked in everything what you said about the lunar cycles is only going to be becoming more aware of that, becoming more aware of the seasonal cycles, as in winter is more a time of rest and renew and restore. And as you were saying, Christmas and New Year's is not the time for intentions. It's not necessarily the best time for parties, whereas spring and summer are the extrovert energy, sun at its highest peak, energy at a macro level rather than a micro level of a day.
Like we mentioned it today at the farm. We got to the farm, right, and it was like everything feels alive and abundant right now. Anything feels possible right now. You go out into nature, it feels like anything is possible. There's like so much life. And then we can tap into that in ourselves. It feels like there's growth, there's abundance, there's fertility. And this is when we really need to be giving our full attention to our dreams. And nature is such a huge teacher for me. I used to go and stand, when I lived in central London, I'd go and stand in Hyde Park in autumn and I'd watch for the leaves to fall from a tree. And you would just see nature, and there was no fuss, there was no drama. You wouldn't see the tree going, what if I let go of this leaf? There's going to be no other leaf. And oh my God, I really shouldn't let go of the leaf. And nature would just go.
It's effortless. It's all in rhythm.
Effortless release. And you'd see that little leaf just. And nature taught me so much about letting go in that.
And trusting. It's kind of ultimately just trusting the harmony of life and to take you where you're meant to be.
And
it's
that's
almost like
what most of
surrendering.
it comes down to is self-trust, that even if the future is always unknown. None of us, all of us sitting here now, none of us can say this is going to happen. We don't even know what's going to happen in the next hour. We're really kind of foolish in that way. And it's a masculine energy of gripping, controlling, micromanaging to give a false sense of security and safety that we can never have, rather than going with the flow, with the ease of trust. And if you get to a space where you really trust yourself, even if the future is scary and unknown and you're uncertain, you've got that little voice in you that says, but no matter what it is, I trust you to take care of this. I trust you to be able to face whatever's coming. I trust you to be able to deal with whatever it is that happens. And when you get that in yourself, that's when, again, life becomes more magical, because you can take those bigger leaps and that bigger trust, because you know that I trust you.
Got it.
You got this.
It's like you've been through a few battles before. Suddenly the next battle, you're like, sure, been through a few. I got this.
And this is it's a beautiful point, because most people really fear that the darkness in life, in nature, in everything. But I think if we're all completely honest with ourselves, the times that we learn the most about ourselves and life is in the depths of winter. It's when we're on our hands and knees. It's when we're on the floor begging the universe, the divine, whoever it may be, like, please help me. I don't know what to do with this. That's when you learn resilience. You learn your own strength. You learn to be there for yourself. And it's actually in those darker times when we're skipping along and the sun's shining and the birds are singing, there's no real growth.
You're carefree.
Yeah. So it's in going through those little battles in life. And again, if we can start to look at those battles as one thing that's really got me through so many hard times in my life, and this is a belief for me, that this held true for me, my soul has chosen this for me, and my soul wouldn't choose anything that I couldn't get through. And so when I'm in those real depths of times, I just say to myself, there's a part of me that knows I can do this. There's a part of me that knows I can get through this. And if I can trust that part of me, I know that I'm going to get through this, and there's going to be something so much more beautiful waiting for me on the other side.
It's a good way of leaning into it, yeah. Like, because as you're saying, like, it's true, our failures and our, those type of things, we learn much more the challenges of life rather than the supposed wins or successes that we might have. Success doesn't necessarily teach you anything. It just generally makes your ego bigger and make you think you're something special, whereas you're no more special than anyone else. I'm speaking that to myself, really.
Yeah.
So everyone's obviously very special. That's you listening. We're all very special. But I'd love to talk about so like in the aspects of astrology. So if we take it macro, because everyone listening might go, I'm a Gemini, or I'm a Libra, or I'm a Scorpio, or all these.
And some people might go, I'm not into that crap. I'm into astronomy because I can measure stuff. But not astrology.
If you've made it this far in the podcast, you're probably into astrology. So I'd love to just talk even on a very macro perspective and go, we're in this absolute age of change. Like it feels like in my 44 years, and I'm speaking for Stephen as well, our 44 years of experience, like the rate of change seems to be amping up, and the rate of uncertainty across economics, politics, education, there's just it really seems that there's such a flux going on at the moment. And when you look at the macro aspects of change and life and what's going on at the moment, if you were to kind of project forward, we're now 2024, if you were to project forward like 6 years, what kind of stuff would you see?
We're in the age of Aquarius, isn't it, right now? Or are we? Or what does all that mean?
Yeah, so we've been able to, what astrology does for us, and it's really important to remember, because we get a lot of like pop astrology where people will do a horoscope and go, if you're a Gemini, this means that this is going to happen.
You're going to fall in love and you're going to make millions this week.
Exactly. And there's a place for it, but it is kind of a bit of pop astrology. If we look first of all at personal astrology, and again, this is my belief, our souls choose to come to Earth at the exact moment they do, because your birth chart gives you a blueprint of your life. So when you look at your birth chart, it gives you a really beautiful indication of the different lessons and challenges and strengths and everything that your soul wants to grow through and experience in this lifetime. So for me, knowing your own birth chart or getting to know it gives you a bit more permission to be you. So, I mean, we've talked about this example a few times when we've been together the past few days, but I'm a Leo sun, which stands to reason that I should love being in the limelight, on stage. Things like this terrify me. Like, it's not a comfortable thing for me to be on stage.
And yeah, you're total natural.
But that's because I've got a Taurus moon. So my Taurus moon wants to be at home on the sofa with snacks. In order for your sun to shine its brightest, you have to nourish your moon. So providing I give my Taurus moon lots of rest either side of doing big events, lots of nurturing, lots of nourishment, when it's time to shine, my Leo sun gets a microphone and goes, brilliant, here we go, here we go. So knowing that about myself, I felt like such a bad Leo for such a long time. And then I learned about my Taurus moon. So anyone listening, if any of this sparks interest, go find out your moon sign, because it'll tell you so much about the true you, the inner you, who you are when nobody else is watching, and what you need to give yourself in life to really feel at home and comfortable in the world. So knowing your own birth chart gives you kind of your part to play in the world. But then we look at bigger transits that are happening that are affecting all of us. And again, I don't want to go into this and make it sound all kind of woo and mystical and things, but we are going through at the moment a really big shift in consciousness, a really big shift on the planet, in all of our systems. And one of the big key players at the moment is the planet Pluto. So Pluto is the planet of death, rebirth, and transformation. So Pluto's got a 248-year orbit, so a really big orbit. So Pluto will stay in a sign for about 20 years. When Pluto moves to a sign, it first of all brings power to that sign, it empowers it, but then it uncovers all the shadows, all the darkness, everything that's lurking in between, the secrets.
The brown envelopes.
Yes. And I speak about Pluto as being a bit of a wrecking ball. When Pluto's just like, let's like because again, when we feel like life is crumbling, it's actually coming together. But sometimes we've got to throw the jigsaw up in the air to then put the pieces of our life where they're actually meant to be, rather than trying to fit pieces where they don't fit and we're not able to create that bigger picture. So Pluto over the past 20 years has moved through Capricorn. So if we look at Capricorn, Capricorn is the masculine sign of the zodiac. So it's talking to the masculine energies in the world. It's about governments. It's about big systems of control. And so what we can see playing out at the moment, even on the world stage for all of us, has been this big grab of big systems, corporations, and now things starting to crumble. We can start to see through certain things. Certain things are collapsing. It feels a very, as you say, unstable in the world at the moment. We're like, but everything just seems to be like, what's going on? Pluto's just about to Pluto's shifted into Aquarius, but it's now what's called retrograde. So this is where planets appear to be going backwards from our vantage point on Earth. Pluto's going to dip back into into Capricorn, and then move into Aquarius for the next 20 years. So Pluto speaks to us as a collective.
How long is it retrograding for?
Until November.
Okay, I was
and then in November, it's going to go into Aquarius for 20 years. Yeah.
So it's kind of wrecking ball, Aquarius, whatever Aquarius is.
Well, it's wrecking ball, the last bit's of Capricorn now, and then it's going to come in and move us into Aquarius. So as we're moving into this Aquarian energy, what we're going to start to see is much more power come back to the people, much more grassroots up kind of energy, much more freedom, equality, people beginning to kind of think for themselves and move for themselves. We are going to see a little increase in kind of AI and social media. Not only will we see the increase, but we might start to see a little bit of the shadows of those kind of things, talking about how much time we need to be spending online and how we're using these new technologies. Pluto's going to help us to really work on everything new that's coming through. But because Pluto's got such a big orbit, none of us are alive in this lifetime. The last time Pluto was there. So we have to look back. And the last time Pluto moved through Aquarius, we had the Industrial Revolution and the French Revolution and the American Revolution.
That was in the 20-year cycle?
In the last, 248
248 years ago in the 28th.
So we're looking now, so when we look back to those times, there was a big seeming collapse of things that then brought through a new power and new structures and new ways. So although it at the moment can very much feel like things are falling apart, it's actually a really exciting time to be alive. Because we get to be part of a new future. We get to be part of, and each and every one of us, we all think we're too small to make a difference, but each one of us has got a part to play in what we want going forward, the kind of world we want to live in. Aquarius is about collaboration and community and people coming back together again and working together and being together.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so we are going to see a big shift into moving into something new. But it's like with anything, if you wanted to build a new house, you've first got to knock down everything that was there, or you want to clear out your wardrobe. First you pull everything out, then you get that moment where you go, oh God, why did I start this? Like, look at the mess.
Yeah.
And then you start to go, oh, okay, this is now making sense of where everything now needs to go and what needs to happen. So we are actually in such an exciting time to be alive.
Wow.
And I said this over the past few years. I was like, again, my soul's chosen to be here right now. My
I
soul's
can handle this.
chosen
I can
to
handle
be
this.
here right now. Yeah. Yeah. So if we can again view it with that excitement and that with the shifting comes change, we're actually in a very, very exciting time.
Well, it's interesting when you look at a 20-year block. Like if you look back 20 years, the change has been enormous.
Yes.
Like on a yearly basis, it's quite manageable. Like it is obviously lots of change, but it's quite manageable on a yearly basis. But when you look over 20 years, like the change has been, there was no mobile phones.
Yes.
Like
There was no
internet,
internet
the internet was at
just
the very start of its thing. There was no social media. There was no cryptocurrencies.
TV
There was
channels.
it was just terrestrial TV.
Yeah.
It was like we weren't consumers as we were today. Like it's changed fundamentally, life has. So I can't imagine if you look forward the next 20 years, what are the things that are the huge big things that are going to happen?
But it is up to us. Like we do give a lot of our power away. We're made to feel quite powerless and like we can't affect change. But if we really want to affect change on a bigger scale, it does start with each one of us. It starts with each one of us deciding. Aquarius again is about, who am I in my fullest authenticity and truth? What do I stand for? What kind of part? If we look at our legacy, what kind of legacy do I really want to leave in this world? And when we can start to affect change in our own life, we don't think it's having an effect. But if we look at the butterfly effect, that you imagine you're having a bad day and one person smiles at you and it shifts your entire day, right? That's the power each one of us has to be able to affect some kind of change. And you think you're not making a difference, but to every single person listening out there, you inspire so many people on a daily basis that you don't even know. And so when we can start to really begin to be true to ourselves and live in that fullest authenticity of what does it mean to be me and who am I at my truth, we give everyone else around us permission to start doing that, and we start to ripple out this beautiful change that first affects your home and then affects your village and then affects your workplace and then affects, so we all get to play a part in this change and where it's going next.
Yeah, it's probably being patient, because most people they overestimate what they can do in a year, and they grossly underestimate what they can do over 5 years or 10 years, because you think you're doing nothing, but if you look over a 10-year period, your life was very, very different, and you've likely lots of things you'd hoped to have come true, and lots of things you didn't hope have come true also. So,
but when you can take conscious control over it or play a conscious part in your life, like many people wait for something outside of you to change, or something else to happen, or them to change. But again, if we bring it back to the lunar cycle, when you take conscious control back over your own life, where am I unfulfilled? Where am I not feeling like I'm living on purpose? Where do I keep repeating patterns and cycles? Where have I seen this play out in my life before? And we start to take that conscious control and we become the active participant in our own life.
yeah.
That's when it gets really special.
It's like the underlying theme, which we're talking about, like we're talking about lunar cycles, and we're talking about living in harmony with the seasons, and we're talking about greater astrology. But ultimately, it's kind of moving out of our head into more in tune, where we have faith with life, whatever the forces of life are. We have faith that life knows best, and we can surrender and be at one with this, which is, that sounds a bit metaphysical, but ultimately...
It's even more to use maybe rational language. In tech circles, there are many people trying to get in flow, and they're trying to advise psilocybin, or they're trying to work out, or whatever it is. But like ultimately, as you said, like you're in Hyde Park watching a leaf fall from the tree. The reason why it's in flow is because it's not trying. It's just totally relaxed. And I think the more we can move into a state of trust and just allowing life to take us where we're, some degree of surrender. We do have autonomy, but we can listen to the signs. The more we'll be in flow, and hence life is a lot easier.
Absolutely.
At least I'm speaking largely to myself here.
Absolutely.
This is what I want to do more of.
And even living with nature, like the same way nature doesn't struggle to let go, nature doesn't struggle to blossom and bloom, and you don't see flowers worrying about what another flower might think of them, or whether they're going to be as good as the flower next to them, or everything in nature knows its place. Everything in that little seed contains everything it needs to grow into exactly what it's meant to be.
Yeah, there isn't a flower looking at the flower next door going, geez, that colour's way nicer. I wish I was a red flower.
Yeah.
They kind
The
of
red,
just,
the flower's just, this is me, and I'm perfectly
I'm
imperfect.
loud and I'm proud and I'm beautiful.
And the same way that I honestly believe each one of us, when we come to Earth, contains that little seed in us that has everything in it that we need to grow into the fullness of who we came here to be. And if any one of us, there's so many beautiful, again, synchronicities and sayings. There's a beautiful saying about, it's more so women's circles, but I put it to everything, that when you get a group of people gathered together, it's like our souls have all gathered together somewhere before and have agreed to come back together again to do this work at this time. And so again, when we start gathering together again in community and in circles, and we start sharing our ideas and our inspiration and our thoughts and the seed in us that only I can give, and this conversation wouldn't be the same if any one of us were missing from it, because we're all bringing ourselves to this. Or
the three.
If one of you was trying to be who you thought that I wanted you to be right now, or say what I thought I wanted you to say, this conversation wouldn't be the same. So when we can bring that fullness of our own seed into our lives and be like, this is me.
But it's a bit like, as you were saying, the more we can become more authentically ourselves, the more we give others permission. And ultimately, I think if you look nowadays, like our food system reflects our social system. Like our food system is based on, certainly from a farming perspective, growing for yield and looks. It's yield and looks. So it's the amount that we can grow and how it looks. And our system at the moment is very external based, whereas the more we can become authentic.
And how does that reflect in the humans? The humans, typically, we're trying to collect things and we're more into
We're trying to look
appearance.
good for others rather than kind of ultimately becoming more in tune and more connected and more whole in ourselves.
Yeah.
So
but
we are
when you
living
get
more
that
in flow.
wonky veg, you look at it and you're like, how perfect is it? Perfect. Same with us. We're all like perfectly
Not everyone
imperfect.
looks like that. Like a lot of people will go look for the perfect. Like it's funny how, like, so we have a fruit shop, we have a veg shop, and like peaches, say for example, now we're in summer, so there's lots of nectarines and peaches, and people will buy hard peaches, and like it's the kind of when they're starting to turn
wrinkle.
When they're starting to wrinkle,
little.
is like, that is the best way to eat it, because it's soft, it's sucking, the juice runs down your face. Like it's giving its nutrition to you. Whereas when you buy, people want to buy the perfect ones and they taste like crunchy potatoes, like, and it's like, don't eat a peach or nectarine like that. Like it's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always eat the rejects, the ones that people don't
And
buy.
similarly, like when you are working, like for example, just to use the analogy of the fruit tree, I can go to a fruit tree and I can go, I'm going to harvest all the apples today, and I'll go and harvest all the apples, and half will be ripe and half won't. Whereas like if I am working with nature, I will harvest, like there's a huge difference. I know when you pick a strawberry when it's ripe, it's sweet, it's succulent, it's juicy, it's magnificent. And when you pick one that isn't ripe, it's a bit like a red turnip. We used to joke that they're a bit like red turnips, those kind of ones out of season. But it's similarly when you are working with nature and working with when something is ripe, it's it picks effortlessly, and when you eat it, it's soft and beautiful. But anyway, I'm going a little off one.
Well, maybe it's back to just the values of realigning, like ultimately trying to let go of some of the cultural values, the cultural ideologies of,
Push,
materials
force,
and push and force and the hustle culture, and ultimately endeavor as best we can to connect to these natural cycles and to the moon and
allowing ourselves to grow.
intuition.
You just spoke beautifully about waiting for strawberries to be ready. I joke very often now that we want to like Amazon Prime our whole lives. So we want everything on next day delivery. I want to meditate once and be enlightened. I want to do one yoga class and be able to do a back bend. I want to do one lunar cycle and
I
it all
want to
has
put
to
10
work.
euro into crypto and turn it into a million in 6 months.
Exactly.
And never work a day.
Yeah. And so we want everything quick. And again, nature isn't like that. Look at nature. She takes her sweet time. She's there exactly at the right moment, exactly at the right time.
Yeah, you can't.
But then she'll turn
You
an oak seed.
You can't grow your kale and sit and just force it. Come on, force it.
Yeah.
It's gonna take.
Or an oak
time.
tree, is a tiny little seed looks like nothing, and after a year or two, it still looks like very, very little. And after 4 years, it's still really spindly and tiny. But after 50 years, it is like a serious impact on the the local habitat and
Absolutely.
even the skyline. You'll see a big oak tree, and you go, "Oh my god, like that's huge." So I guess it's ultimately
Okay, another nice segue.
Yeah.
Purpose. I think that builds on intuition. Many people out there are kind of like, well, what's my purpose? What's my meaning in life? I'm on this earth to do something. And possibly these are two big metaphysical questions. But for anyone out there who's kind of struggling, really does want some degree of a direction, how do they hear the whispers of their soul?
Intuition and purpose and these type of
I
things.
absolutely love this question because I always come with it's the question I get asked most. How do I find my purpose?
Wow, is it?
Yeah.
More so than intuition or lunar cycles?
They kind
or
of
Mercury
tie
retrograde.
in together. Oh yeah, we must talk
Yeah,
about
but-
Mercury.
Yeah,
no,
I've got
We
three which you want
must.
to talk about. Yeah.
So I come with a really big spoiler alert when it comes to purpose, because so many of us see our purpose as this big elusive thing out there. When I get that, I'll be happy. When that thing happens, I'll be happy. When I find this mystical, magical pot of gold at the end of a rainbow, I'll be happy. The spoiler alert is that you are your purpose. Your purpose is to be
Great one.
you.
So you're saying it's not to make €1 million and buy that big
And
house and
not
marry
to
the-
help feed all the hungry children or whatever it might
that
be.
may come, but your purpose is to be more you. And the whole
like
time that
that.
you're pretending to be someone that you're not, or pretending who you think other people want you to be, you're never going to find the presence of your purpose. So you came here to this earth to be you. And as you can become more you, you can get to know yourself more. Most people, I don't do one-to-one work so much now, but I used to work with a lot of predominantly women. And women, again, in particular, are so used to taking care of everybody else. I'd work with women who wouldn't even know what they wanted for breakfast. Like, they couldn't even make the decision of what do I want for my breakfast, because it'd be like, well, what do the kids want for breakfast and what does do? So there would be such a disconnect from even knowing who you are or what you want. So the more you can become you, the more your purpose will become clear. And what we also need to remember is that you will go through lots of little purposes in your life. So people will look at me for an example and say, well, it's all right for you, you're living your purpose. I am. I adore what I do. Like, I genuinely love with every cell of my being what I do. I love it. But people don't see the 15-year journey it took me to get here. And all my little purposes along the way, from becoming a yoga teacher, a crystal healer, a regressional therapist, a meditation teacher, a Reiki healer, all those little purposes that at the time weren't the bigger purpose, but they've all led me to be able to sit here now and talk about astrology and this and this and this. So our life consists of all these little purposes along the way where we become more of ourselves and we find that interest in more of what we want, and we start to feel into, because even when we look at the spiritual world, no one knows the exact truth until we go back there, if you believe there's a there that we go to. No one can say categorically, this is the absolute truth of the universe, because we don't know.
No.
So it's about what's true for you. What's true for you? What's my truth? And one big lesson I learned along the way is that when I very first started on a spiritual journey, I needed everybody else to believe what I believed in. And it came from a well-meaning place in the beginning, because it genuinely changed my life so much that I wanted everybody else to know about all these things I was learning. But when I reflect back now and I look back, it's because I didn't fully believe it. So you believe in it meant it must be true. So then I could believe it more. But over the years, I've got to know my truth so much that even if you and everyone listening now were like, that's a load of rubbish, I don't believe it, it's still my truth. Yeah. It still enables me to live a happy and purposeful and content life. And so it's about just becoming more you. What do I believe in? What's
So how does
true
anyone
for
like
me?
listening who goes,
Your
I want
purpose
to
is you,
become
it's
me?
lovely.
How does anyone listening who kind of goes, great. How do I become more me? How do I?
Does that mean I'm more
what are
like Taylor
practical
Swift? Does that mean I'm more like
what
you
are
know,
practical things that I can do to start this journey to kind
Yeah.
of start to uncover what is more me?
So first of all, that's a really brilliant, actually beautiful point, saying, do you be more Taylor Swift? One of the first things I ask people to really get clear on is, what are your values? Because most people don't know what their values are. And quite often when we feel really icky and purposeless and like not very content,
drive, yeah.
it's because we're out of alignment with our value system. And so start to look at maybe Taylor Swift. And if you look at Taylor Swift and go, oh my God, Taylor Swift is the most amazing person in the world, beautiful. What do you love about Taylor Swift? What is it you love about her? Well, she's brave and she's powerful and she's confident.
What if you find you're distracted and you're going, she's rich and famous, which many people will do. How do you address that? Or how do you go to the deeper values behind that?
So what we need to really remember is that there is absolutely nothing wrong with being rich and famous. Like there's nothing wrong with it. And if that truly is what you want, fine. But what we need to remember is that's not going to bring you happiness. And I'm sure we can all agree that we can often look at people with the most amount of money and they're actually deep down unhappy. It doesn't buy you happiness. So what we want to really begin to do over time is begin to not make our happiness dependent upon any person, place or thing. So once you found a happiness and a truth in you, it doesn't. You look at people like Mother Teresa and people who lived in slum. You look at India. I spent a lot of time in India. Some of those kids in the little villages with nothing, happiest children ever, because they're in the moment. They're out in nature. They've got one football between 30 of them, and they're absolutely loving it. And so there's nothing wrong with having the riches as long as they're not the reason for your happiness. So if that wealth got taken from me, would all of my happiness disappear with it? If that big car got taken from me, and if the answer is yes, you need to again then really start to return to who are you without all of those things. Once you find that happiness in you, have it all. There's a big thing in the spiritual community. If it's not spiritual to have money and things, why not? Providing that's not the reason for your happiness and you're motivated. It's all about attachment. So when we look at life, one of the biggest causes of suffering in life, if we look at even deep yoga philosophy, is that we're trying to hold on to what we believe will make us happy and we're trying to push away what we think is going to make us unhappy. So we're in this constant cycle of pushing away and gripping. And even when you do those actions in your body, it feels so uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable trying to constantly micromanage your life and push that away because that's going to feel uncomfortable for me and I don't like it and I can't let this thing go because it makes me happy. Whereas again, when we can have that trust and faith to just go, nothing meant for me will ever pass me by. And so back to your question, if you're very unsure of like, well, who am I?
Yeah, you had values. Values was the first.
Find your values, but just start to spend time with yourself. Like for most people, the idea of spending time alone is uncomfortable. The idea of spending time alone in silence is like the most uncomfortable thing. We need that constant stimulation because we're trying to run away from ourselves. If you can't take yourself out on a date or for coffee, how are you going to expect anybody else to do that for you? So can you just start to spend little pockets of time by yourself? If people can, I suggest traveling by yourself is one of the most empowering things you will ever do. I remember the first time I went to India on my own and it was terrifying. And I used to have this little thing where I'd put my own cheek against my own shoulder so I could feel my skin against my skin. And I'd say like, it's all right, Kirsty, I've got you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to be here for you. I'm going to look after you. Don't you worry. I've never known, I knew myself then. And again, make a promise to yourself of how you'll show up for yourself every day. Most people, if you can't find 5 minutes a day for you, there's a really big problem. Because if I said to either one of you now, oh, give me 5 minutes of time, you'd be like, oh, I'm busy, but sure, okay, what do you need? Yet we constantly say to ourselves, I'll start to meditate tomorrow or train tomorrow or go for a run tomorrow and then I'm too tired or cold or hungry or that person needs me. But every time you let yourself down, every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you say no when you mean yes, every time you agree to something you don't agree with, every time you hide a part of yourself, you abandon yourself and you tell yourself you're not worthy. Every time you deny an emotion, you tell your emotions that they're not valid.
Wow.
So just begin to spend time with yourself. In emotion, one of the greatest
things... Love is
things,
honesty. Honesty is love.
But one of the best things everyone can do, honestly, if you want one simple thing to do every day, first thing in the morning if you can, but once a day, set a little timer on your phone for 2 to 3 minutes and just put your hands over your heart and just check in and say like, how are you today? Because we ask everybody else, you never ask yourself. And what you might find is your heart goes, I'm sad today. And then we go, I don't want to feel sad. So we open our eyes and we get our phone out and we scroll and we put Netflix on and we go, sit with it and go, okay, darling, you feel sad. That's all right. I'm going to sit here with you. Can you imagine if I came to you and said, I feel sad today? And you went, well, what do you feel sad for? You've got no
Get on with it. Come on, look how lucky you are.
Yeah. I'd very quickly stop coming to you. Same with ourselves. So just sit with yourself. How are you today? Feel a bit sad? Okay. You don't even need a reason for it. We don't need to find reasons for how we're feeling. Just sit in the sad for a moment. And then you find the sad will bubble up and then you might get a little joy and a little gratitude and then a little bit of grief and a little bit of sadness. But if you can just sit with yourself and know, I'm not going to leave you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be right here with you no matter what's going on. You're going to trust yourself to be there for you in the difficult times. And then ask yourself, what do you need today? It's one thing, what do you need? I need you to be kinder to me today. I need an early night today because I've been rushing around a little bit. I need to have that difficult conversation today that I've been putting off a little bit. What do you need today? What's one thing I can do for you today that's going to make you feel really nourished and cared for? That's how you're going to start to get to know yourself. So you try to ask yourself, what's my purpose? And you're asking the same self you spent your whole time going, you're useless, you're rubbish. What do you feel like that for? How's that part of you ever going to then tell you what your big purpose in life is? So come back to you. Spend that time with you. Start with 3 minutes. Build up to an hour. Build up to taking yourself for a cup of coffee. Build up to taking yourself to the cinema on your own. Build up to taking yourself on holiday or going out for a walk on your own. And start to just get to know you. What do I like? What do I want? What do I need? What are my desires? What are my hopes? What are my dreams? And then your purpose. People have this big misconception that your purpose has to be your job. And often it does become that, because when you find something that's so purposeful to you, you want to start to share it. But your job is allowed to just be a job where you go to earn some money. And your purpose can be to be the best mother that you can be to raise the next generation. Your purpose can be to be the best listener to your group of friends so they've all got someone to come to who's going to hold space. Your purpose could be spending time in nature, getting your hands in the earth, healing the soil. So we need to, again, disconnect. My purpose has to be my job. It doesn't. The two can be different initially while you find yourself.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, I want to move the conversation into, I've got 3 things which I definitely know we want to cover. Mercury retrograde, Saturn return, and midlife crisis. These are 3 things that you hear bandied around. You hear Mercury retrograde. Oh, my phone isn't working. Oh, the computer broke.
Oh, they didn't get my email and now it's the bridge is down and I'm going to...
And then you consistently hear Saturn. Oh, well, sure, you're 28. You're going into your Saturn return.
Yeah.
Like you hear that. To a less degree. And then you hear the classical midlife crisis of the 40-year-old man that, buys a sports car and has an affair or woman, vice versa. Those are the... So
cliches.
Could you tell us about those
Let's
cliches?
touch on these. I love, first of all, I love that Mercury retrograde gets more talked about because it just brings astrology into, and it brings, I think with everything in life, we've got to have an element of fun with it. Like, again, the spiritual world can be very serious. You've got to be in full lotus position with the right things and the incense burning and all. We're all busy, right? So Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrograde is when the planet Mercury appears from our vantage point on Earth to go backwards. So the best way I can describe
But
it
it's not actually going backwards.
It's not actually going backwards. But it's when you're on a train and the other train starts to move and you've got that optical illusion, or you're in a car and another car starts to go quicker than you on the motorway and you've got that optical illusion of going backwards. That's exactly what happens. It's an optical illusion. Mercury retrograde has a bad rap because Mercury governs communication, transport. And so what we can tend to find around Mercury retrograde is that there's a lot more tech meltdowns. There's a lot more, I always laugh because nearly every Mercury retrograde, like social media goes down. It's like Mercury retrograde's gone, just you watch and see how powerful I am. Flight delays, missed trains, all these kind of things. Communication can go a bit off where we kind of feel like we're speaking a different language and we're like, why aren't people getting what I want? Mercury retrograde is so beautiful and so powerful because what Mercury retrograde says to us is slow down. Slow down. We live in a world where we're so busy. And again, another analogy I use is when we're living in central London, you're on the tube platform and you'll find someone runs onto the platform and the tube's just leaving and they're like, it's like the worst thing in the world. They've just missed a tube. And you're like, there's another tube in 1 minute. Like it's all right. We spend our whole lives doing that. So Mercury retrograde says, do you really need to rush for that tube? Can you give yourself an extra half an hour to get to work and go the scenic route and go slow and gaze out of the window and watch the world go by? Do you really need to be scrolling on Instagram? Do you really need to be banging away and sending all those emails? And then with our communication, Mercury retrograde says to us, are you mindful of your words? Are you just spewing out a load of words because you think it sounds good or you want to be the one that gets heard? Can we just get really intentional with our communication and really feel into what it is that I want to say and what it is that I want to speak? So Mercury retrograde happens about 3 times a year for 3 weeks at a time. So it
Wow,
happens,
so
Wow,
it's
3
9
weeks
a
is
year.
quite a long. So 9
happens
weeks a year.
regularly.
So it's probably a sixth of a year.
Yeah, so it's not something that only happens like once every so often. Like Mars retrograde only happens every 2 years.
Yeah, sixth of a year,
So
exactly.
we get this little chance 3 times a year to
15%
just
of the
look
year.
at our lives and say, where am I rushing? Where am I pushing? Where am I struggling? Where am I leaving things to the last minute? Where am I fighting against the natural flow? And instead, Mercury's all about the re-words. Can I revisit? Can I re-explore? So Mercury retrograde, there's a big
Recycle,
reset,
renew.
recycle, renew. And there's always big jokes about Mercury
Reconsider.
retrograde that exes come back around. And they do. If you start to notice, there's Mercury retrograde is the time when all of a sudden an ex out
Recycle
of the blue-
relationships.
Yeah. But what Mercury retrograde does is it helps us to tie up loose ends wherever there's unfinished business in your life. So there's a really beautiful saying about you can't get to your future while your past is still present. So while we've still got little threads pulling us back into the past, you can never fully move into a future because those past experiences will colour your future. So if you're not perhaps totally over an ex and there's unfinished business, you're going to go into every relationship then with that lens of that past relationship. And that's when we repeat cycles. We're like, this same thing always happens to me. I pick the same kind of people over and over again. And people don't like to believe that we choose our partners based on our wounding, based on our parents, all those. But we do. We really do. We pick those same people that repeat our patterns until we break that cycle. So Mercury will bring back anything unfinished so you can close that door, close that chapter, tie up that loose end.
So
let
it's
it
almost
go.
get like create more space for Mercury because stuff is going to come up.
Absolutely. So just be aware that it's coming up and be aware to slow down a bit. If you've got to travel anywhere, give yourself
So when's
extra
the next
time.
Mercury retrograde? We're now
August the
nearly to-
5th and then November. So August to November this year.
wow.
Nice that they come. It's not like there's one in Q1, there's one in Q2,
Yeah.
there's one in Q3. It's more just,
Yeah.
nature
Yeah,
isn't
'cause
often.
with Mercury retrograde and going direct and things, we get the different kind of cycles as they switch
Wow.
and move. So Mercury retrograde is just a beautiful time to reassess, to re-explore, to slow down, to look back at your past, to
reflect.
revisit certain things, to reflect, to renew. And then as Mercury goes direct again, we bring through everything we learned in that retrograde period.
like the
and
opportunity
we
to-
move forwards in a different way.
I like the reframing
So
of
it's-
purpose and reframing
It's
of Mercury
really
retrograde. Very good.
powerful.
Yeah.
Saturn return.
Oh, yeah, Saturn return, yeah.
Again, we get a
Around
lot
28, isn't it?
around 28, around roughly. You'll start to feel your Saturn return. So basically your Saturn return will last for a period of a couple of years. Some people a little bit longer because your Saturn return is where Saturn returns back to the place it was when you were born. Now, Saturn is the planet of structures, foundation, discipline, life lessons. So we
It's
hear
like
a
the
lot again
fatherly
about
figure. It's like the fatherly figure.
exactly that.
Duty,
Yes.
responsibility.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
but you got it. So a lot of people say Saturn return, your whole life falls apart, everything implodes. It's the time you want to quit your job and go traveling, your relationship breaks down, you quit your job. And yes, this is true. But what Saturn's actually doing is Saturn is helping you to lay the foundations. You're coming into adulthood now, like real adulthood. You're coming into, you are your own sovereign being with responsibility over your own life. So Saturn wants to lay the foundations for your life. Is this really the job you want to do for the rest of your life? Is this really the kind of relationship you want to be in for the rest of your life? Are these really the value systems that you want to live by for the rest of your life? So Saturn comes in and just helps you to question everything and really wants you to be right disciplined now. What do you want for your life? What do you want? What's your life about? What's your legacy going to be? What have your big life lessons been to this point? So although it can feel like a time of turmoil, confusion, identity crisis, you come out of your Saturn return, and for most people it happens around 30. And I don't know about you, and I don't know if it's different for women. I love turning 30 because all of a sudden I just didn't give a shit anymore. I was like, this is who I am. If you don't like it, don't look at it. If you don't want to hear what I've got to say, don't listen. Saturn's authority. It's about real self-authority. It's coming into that place of authority over your own life, sovereignty over your own life of this is, and you do care a little less about all those silly things you worried about in your early 20s and keeping up with the crowds and different things like that. So it brings about a turmoil, a crumbling of foundations and systems and structures in order then to rebuild or put in solid foundations you want to begin to build the rest of your life upon. So this kind of feeds in as well then to the midlife crisis era, because we will then have another Saturn return.
Oh, so that's what it is. Midlife is just
we'll have another Saturn return. So when we come into 50s, we'll have things like Uranus oppositions and things when we come into our 40s. So we do tend to find again around 40s. And we also get around this age what's called our Chiron return. So Chiron is what's known as the wounded healer. Chiron in your birth chart shows you the deep wounds you come into this lifetime with that you're going to learn your greatest lessons from. And it shows you where there's purpose in your pain. And it shows you wisdom in your wounds. So it shows you what you're going to grow through. And then you're going to be able to really give that wisdom. Because unless you've really been through something, you can try and empathize and sympathize, but you don't really know what it feels like. So Chiron gives us that kind of wounding we're going to go through. We again come through a Chiron return, which is when again then we find that we're really looking at our lives. We're looking at a lot of relationships tend to break down and things around this point.
Is in the 40s, early 40s.
As we start to come back into that, the wounds starting to resurface, the sense of identity again starts to come through. And I'll just speak for women here, because I'd love to. I know you've got like a predominantly female audience, and I know your audience is probably a little bit younger than this, but there's a real, for me, reclamation at the moment. A lot of talk even around menopause and perimenopause and things. And this again is such a powerful time of reclamation for women, because we've been taught that women have kind of got a sell by date, right? And once you get to a certain age, you're a bit over the hill and you're no good anymore. And society wants youth and beauty and all these kind of things. But when you come into like crone energy, that real crone energy, that wisdom energy. So the crone, when we look at maiden mother crone used to be when women got to kind of their 40s, but that was back before, when we didn't kind of live as long and we had children a lot younger. So now crone is seen as when you've been through menopause, when you're after menopause. And we've got what's called the mage energy now, which is perimenopause. When women retain their bleed and women stop bleeding, they retain what's called their wise blood. They retain all of their power and all of their magic. So the crone back in the days would have been the wise woman of the village. It would have been the energy that everyone went to for wisdom, for answers, for guidance. Yeah. And so again, I think as more women are reclaiming this time of life, it's a reintroduction to yourself. It's a reintroduction to who am I? What do I really want from life? What are my priorities? Who do I really want to be in the world? It's a real reclamation of that wisdom. And so we tend to find a lot of shifts happen around this time as well.
Wow. Really
and
fun.
final one, Uranus conjunction. Uranus.
So whenever we get
Opposition.
Uranus, whenever we get Uranus.
When's that around 45 or something?
Yeah, whenever we get Uranus energy, Uranus comes in to shake things up. Uranus
in
comes
a way like
into,
Pluto is, in a different way.
In a different way.
It's
Uranus comes in more like to raise things to the ground and shake things up and destroy things. Uranus comes for liberation, for freedom, for awakening. So if you've been sleepwalking through life, and I call it TikTok, when we like get up and go to work and do the job and come home and put the Netflix on, and we're in that, Uranus will shake us out of it and shake us out of where we've been in and shake us out of where we've been really stuck as well. And so when we get anything to do with Uranus in our chart, it's going to really want to free and liberate us, to be like,
to rebel.
Who did you, to rebel, to go against the norm, to be that rebel, to be authentically true to you, to be who you really deep down came here to be, and to stop conforming to so many of society. Like, who made all these rules and regulations that we've all just got into line and started adhering to? Can we start to shake up the status quo a little bit? And then the last thing that's normally quite potent around this time is we've got what's called the lunar nodes in our birth chart. So your lunar nodes are your destiny in life.
So your north node, your south node.
Yes.
Those are your nodes.
So your south node they're always opposite each other in your chart. Your south node is past lives, what you brought into this lifetime with you. It's where you're really comfortable. It's where your comfort zone is. And your north node is what you're growing into. But the journey there, it's going to stretch you. It's going to expand
the metamorphosis.
you. It's going to make you feel really uncomfortable and take you out of your comfort zone. So we tend to there's a 19-year nodal kind of axis. So we tend to find that as we get our second, like our return, our lunar nodes return again, we start to really be driven into more of what's my purpose, what do I want to do, who did I come here to be, and what did I come here to really offer to the world. So it's just shaken us out of any stagnation that we've got ourselves caught in.
It's brilliant. It's fascinating. I love all this stuff.
It's really brilliant.
And Kirsty, you've written 4 books.
Five books.
Five.
And the 6th one now.
No, 5th one. 5.
The Goddess Path.
Goddess Path is number 5. They've just come out, yeah.
Which is your favourite of all your children? Your 5 children?
Lunar Living.
I mean, Lunar Living is
That's your first book.
Lunar Living is the favourite because it's my first book. And so I loved the whole process of writing Lunar Living. And I love the whole process of bringing this kind of ancient knowledge to the... One thing I really try and pride myself on is making what's woo and mystical and making it real and relatable, because there's so much fluff sometimes in the spiritual world. But how does like Sarah down at number 30 bring that into her life? Like it gets made a bit unattainable. So Lunar Living I adored because it just started to get people to have that little check-in every month. Where am I going? What do I want? Am I being true to myself? But then the Goddess Path was a real... I've been working with the Goddess I've been doing this work for over 20 years.
So what does it mean, the Goddess Path? Sorry, I know we're running out of time.
So the Goddess Path it was a book around the remembering and reclaiming of the divine feminine. And so as we touched on before, we live in a very masculine world. And especially again for women, we've spent our whole lives being pitted against each other with our bodies, our behaviours, our beauty standards put up for scrutiny. We're constantly being compared to each other in magazines and on social media. Women have been very much taught, and this is probably a bigger conversation for another time, to start to go into things like the witch wound and the sister wound. But if we look back in the ages, women who lived in alignment with their intuition, women who were sovereign, women who were powerful, women, they were burned at the stake. So there's all these deep woundings ingrained in the feminine, listening to your intuition, listening to your inner knowing, following your path, speaking your truth, using your own voice. And then women are also, I feel, very much more sold these unrealistic beauty standards by the people who benefit from us.
Yeah, of course.
One of the biggest truths I tell women all the time is that your worth does not need to be earned in this world. It just needs to be remembered and reclaimed. You get to decide your worth. But we're constantly told our worth in these, you've got to have this mascara, this body, this look, behave like this. And so we are sold to in this consumerism, capitalist culture on what we need to be doing or look like or behave like. And again, women get pitted against each other a lot. And the Goddess Path was around this reclamation of the feminine energy, and once again living back in alignment with seasons, with cycles, with nature, remembering who you are before the world told you who to be, remembering your worth. Because we look outside of ourselves so often for validation and approval and permission, and the only person truly you ever really need approval and validation and permission from is you. And when we can remember that, and we can start to self-validate, and we can start to give ourselves permission for what we want, and we can start to be so strong in our sense of self, and from that trust ourselves, know ourselves, begin to listen to our intuition and follow it. So we started with this. All of those feminine things we're told are rubbish and useless. Flow, rest. One of the chapters is about reclaiming rest, because we live in this world that constantly wants you to prove your worth. And we glamorize being busy, and we glamorize having to-do lists. And so many of us will not give ourselves permission to rest. Even when we're resting, we hear someone come home, we'll jump up off the sofa.
Oh yeah,
and try
I better look busy.
Make ourselves look busy, because
I was trying to have a nap yesterday. My daughter came in and was like, "Oh yeah, I'm working. Yeah. No, I'm going to do work soon. Yeah, very soon."
But why? Why? Because we've forgotten that.
Must be productive.
Because you live in your mother, in case your mother's looking over your shoulder.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
But also that patriarchal world that is success and on the treadmill and 60-hour work weeks, and we've got to get to the next level, and you're only successful if you do this, or you've got all the money, or you've got... To me, true success isn't necessarily a figure in a bank account. It's been able to go and walk in nature every afternoon. It's been able to spend quality time with people I love. They're the true... And so it's about redefining what success means for you. And it's about realising, I tell my team this all the time, and the Goddess Path taught me this. I would sit there on a tight deadline in the masculine, writing. I can't afford to take a break. I've got all this writing to do. And when it got too much and I'd go out in nature and I'd let myself just be, I have got hundreds of hours of voice notes in my phone when all of a sudden, that inspiration would come in and a chapter would write itself. And it didn't come from me sitting and forcing and pushing and micromanaging. It came from stepping away.
Yeah.
And so I say to my team all the time, if you're struggling, don't sit and struggle even more. Going outside when you're too busy to rest or self-care or take a break, that's when you know you're on the treadmill to burn out. And that's when you've got to take yourself off that treadmill and you've got to go and get your feet on the earth and you've got to just come back to a sense of self. So the Goddess Path taught me a lot in the writing of it, of really... It challenged me in every which way about being in trust and surrender and flow, and everything I was writing about. It was like the goddess was like, "Are you living by that?
Yeah,
Are you really doing that?
You talking a good game? Are you doing it?
Yeah. So it was a beautiful book to write, and it's been beautiful seeing her out there in the world and changing the lives of so many people.
Brilliant. Yeah, well done. Because you're at the end of your book tour for the Goddess Power. Yeah. So
Goddess Path.
Oh, Goddess Path. Well, Path Power. Sorry. I make it the title, but
Same but different. Yeah.
Well, well done. This has been fantastic.
Thanks.
Yeah, very important.
And you've got a membership, don't you, for anyone who's listening that wants to learn more?
I do. I have an online membership around the moon and the lunar cycles where every month I'll tell you all you need to know about that particular moon, how she's affecting us, how to work with the energies. There's meditations, there's journal prompts. And then I do a lot of online workshops around astrology and big astrological events so we can really harness that energy and use it to be able to... Because what astrology does is it doesn't make us do anything, but it helps us make sense of what's happening on the earth. And when we can harness that energy, we can again live in much more alignment with what wants to come through for us.
Yes, I come with the natural flow of life. Yeah, amazing.
Well,
Thank you,
done,
Kirsty. You're
Kirsty.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Wonderful.
having me.
And an Instagram, Kirsty Gallagher, Kirsty
That's
_Gallagher.
Yes,
Kirsty
correct.
Kirsty Gallagher. Yeah. Amazing. Well,
Thank
there we go.
you.
Thank you, Kirsty. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
While we have you, once a week we write a newsletter. It's called Happier. It's got simple, tried and tested practices to make your life better. We include recipes and practices that you can apply on a daily basis to make your life happier. We've had lots of people say before that it's really helped make their life better. So you can sign up on the happypair.ie, our weekly newsletter called Happier.